Hey folks, Kristen here, and as I come to the end of another month and the end of another calendar season, I wanted to check in and reflect a little bit over the last month. First of all, I think I do best with doing these videos and newsletters around the end of the month, and that gives me more time and energy to dedicate to my virtual classrooms and all my online and offline design and art projects. If you want to hear more from me, you'll want to join me in one of those classrooms, and I'll talk more about that later in this video. Also, you can scroll down if you're reading. If you want to read this, I've basically am reading verbatim from this month's newsletter, but I wanted to start making video versions of this so that for those of you who are more audio and visual, you could see me. Uh, so if you are reading or watching this and you're already in one of my online circles, go ahead and pause. September 1st, some of you may be reading this on the night I release this, which is August 31st. But if you're reading this on September 1st, 2020, your special note is already in your group. May not be up front yet, but by the end of the day on September 1st, if you're already in one of the online circles, you'll have a special message. And yes, there will be more videos. So all of that is forthcoming. But if you want to share this message, please share this message with folks that aren't necessarily in the groups already, or feel free to watch this all the way through because there's definitely things here that you'll learn. And I'll be repeating some of this information, but for here right now, if you want to be up on it, what I'm going to say, stay here. So first and foremost, the actions taken this summer in regards to the racism and other marginalization in the design world, specifically the anti-Black racism in the design world, were long overdue. I actually have to admit that I did not realize how, despite all my work over the years, the online activism, this is 10 years of the Black Urbanist, and then just offline being on different project teams and speaking out. And I didn't realize just how many places were not listening, were not changing, and even oblivious to all that's been going on. But then again, I didn't really realize, and honestly, I didn't have to know because I kind of already know. If I really think about it, I knew. And I've known for a long time. I guess I just thought more of us knew and more of us have been processing, more of us have been pushing. You know, we've had so many events and summits and such, but I did not realize that it's that whatever has just happened, maybe it's the pandemic or whatever, but this summer has made us zero in. Because for me, this started way back in the spring of 2010. My father, as many of you know, I've talked about his manic depression prior to his death, but that's the sort of the cycle of him going into his, I say in his transition away from this world started in the spring of 2010. And I literally watched him shatter his world and in a lot of ways our worlds. He had had a manic episode. He had had an argument. He jumps in his car, and about 10 minutes later, he's speeding down the road, speeds through a red light, and he ejects from the vehicle. Other people get all mixed up in it. It's a Sunday afternoon. It's a slow news day, and I'm going to talk a lot about the news and media in this particular video, and I do in the remarks I've written. But yeah, was that was life changing, and already that tipped me to, okay, things aren't exactly what they seem. My little bit of innocence was already wiped away, and there are plenty other times, but this was really a key point a decade ago, seeing my father go through this. But still, I don't think he should have been punished. Now, yes, there are definitely things, and I hope that everybody who was victimized by that day, I hope you were able to get your restitution prior to his death. If not, I'm deeply sorry. You know, there were a lot of other things that I had to divest of my father, but one of those things is I still don't think that he or anybody else out here should be punished by 1 hour bus headways, by no public bathrooms, by no sidewalks, by 6-lane roads, just because they can't own a vehicle and they can't conduct themselves in what we would consider a respectable way around land use and being in the public and having resources. And so I talked about this on Instagram the week we all found out or witnessed George Floyd's death, that my dad's actual death was not from police violence. Now, I was scared as someone suffering from mental health issues. That was something that was always in the back of my mind, that he could call 911 on himself, be so erratic that he would just tip them off and then bang, bang, or boom, boom, he was gone. Um, Now, a boom boom did happen, but it wasn't at the hands of the police. But we part of the reason this case is a cold case is that I and I did have the final word on this. And I have some family members who would still like to pursue this, but I personally don't exactly know. It's been a very long time at this point. I don't want to put anyone behind bars into the justice system that doesn't need to be there just because I don't know for sure who they are. And that started for me back in 2008. I was robbed at gunpoint when I lived in Durham. I lived in South Durham in one of the luxury apartment complexes there on Route 54. Those of you who know the area probably know which apartment complex I lived in. And I was coming back from a poetry reading at the mansion on Franklin Street in Chapel Hill. Once again, if you know the area, you know where I'm going. And of course, I'm wearing my home shirt in this video today. So those of you who know the area, but it was a great night. I had gone out, I was by myself, and I was on the phone, and at 1 foot out of the car, 1 foot in, I had parked. And it doesn't matter that it wasn't lit. It doesn't matter that I was by myself. It doesn't matter I was on the phone. Just point blank, I felt some metal in the back of my head. At first I thought it was a bug, but then I looked around. I had this gift of having this blood curdling scream. So I blood curdle screamed, and the person grabbed my purse. They didn't grab my phone, but they ran away. And I was out there screaming, "Why'd you do this? You're robbing a sister. Why are you doing this?" I could tell that this was a Black individual, but I could not tell what they looked like. And they had on a ski mask. And so the Durham police wanted me to identify this person. By the way, they sent 5 cars over that night for just me and this person. And it was an off-duty officer from another force who tackled him, but he got away that night. Now, they wanted me to go and look at him in a lineup. It was dark. He was ski masked. Why would I identify someone I don't know and put them unnecessarily into the justice system? Yeah, even if they were in a lineup, still, there are sometimes people in those lineups. As we know, this system is not fair, is not equitable. That's what we've been seeing all summer. And even if you are an employee in the system, in the case of Breonna Taylor, and granted EMTs are still part of the emergency and first responders, you still not protected. And I wasn't going to be that person. Now he did get prosecuted for something else, including the crime he committed against me later, but I was not part of that. That was 2 years later. And yes, this is 2008. This is Durham County. So those of you who know about the Durham Clause and everything, yeah, some of the interesting activities of the district attorney's office were at play at this point in time, but I don't really think that had anything to do with it, but this was at play. So October of 2010, I'm in my first semester of grad school, and I'm opening up my textbook. And those of you who've known me for a while, know the story, the origin story of starting the site. But I'm going to tell you again, in case you're completely new and you've only known about me this summer, someone's told you about me, you've been in the Googling and everything. So all that happened to me. And so I ended up moving back to Greensboro, North Carolina. I moved in with my mom. My parents have been divorced, and so 2 separate residences. And the one, my dad died in the residence he kept. But 2010, fall of that year, dad's stable again after the wreck, and he's back doing things on his own. And I'm first semester grad school at UNC Greensboro in the MPA program. And I opened up my urban policy textbook, and basically there was no mention of, and this is no dig against anyone who grew up in public housing. That is a key part of Black American life. But another key part of Black American life is the fact that we did have property and own farms, and many of us were free years longer than expected, and many people were able to leave slavery. Those of you who are in the book club section, my last lesson, the last chapter we focused on out of the Chocolate Cities book, was on Ida B. Wells Barnett, who was able to, who was born into slavery, but was able to amass land and property and advocate. And so that she wasn't in there, definitely not in there as a Black urban person. I don't know if she would have called herself an urbanist, and some folks have said maybe she wouldn't call herself a feminist, but we do claim her. She definitely was in the suffrage movement, but still, there was no mention of that. And so I have been blogging. I've been a writer. I wrote my first book at 6 years old as a class project, won my first writing award the following year. That book had a lot of elements of urbanism or urban planning, and rural life. These were um, farm products like jellies and jams going to do things in the city. So I've been creating and thinking around urbanism. My father taught me how to read a map. So, and all these, I had been writing this blog, and it was about urban planning. It was about education. It was about media and other topics, but it was called Waxing Philosophical. Nothing wrong with that name. But I realized, okay, maybe I should write something under a name that could have been anyone. And so I noticed that that's where the name The Black Urbanist comes from. For those of you who are curious about why I call the blog and why the platform's called The Black Urbanist, that's really the core of it. And I want to dig deeper into sort of why on the media side, I feel like it's still important to still call myself this, even though we have been having the discussion on the design side about the elitism in the term urbanist. But I do want to highlight why on the media side, being a careful and loving and mindful caretaker of that word is important. So I saw a stat earlier today that said that less than 5% of all owned media outlets rather are Black owned in the United States. So on an Instagram post, which is linked into in the text, about one of the handful of design focused Black media outlets called Afrocheek. I had been familiar with this group. It was on the Design Sponge Instagram. Once again, another mostly white-led group that actually divested and now is coming back as a Black-led design media outlet. But the other one, Afrochic, has been around a little bit longer. I didn't realize they were even still posting. And they, in another post on their main Instagram, they talked about how before they got into the design, they were a policy attorney. And that's honestly the story of a lot of us, working one job during the day and doing design or art or something else at night, suffering through working through offices or in communities or somewhere else without adequate pay or support. And the funding and support for Black media, Black art, designs, building building real estate in Black neighborhoods is minuscule compared to everything else. I don't have all the stats on hand, but those of you who've been reading and studying this summer, and if you still are comprehending that, yes, our minuscule. And that's why and specifically around the media. Yeah, you may know a Black architect now, a Black planner. You may have seen the Bicycling Magazine article or Good Morning America and Fast Company, but know that this is very rare. And may know about Ebony and Essence, but it's still very rare. Or the traditional Black press, your town may have a Black paper. This is still very, very rare for us as Black people to own our press. And that's why I'm so proud and thankful that the Maynard Institute for Journalism Education looped me into their inaugural Maynard 200 class, which consisted of me and four other media people of color. And this is not, the Maynard Institute focus is on giving people of color, Black, Indigenous, Asian, Latin, of the Latin community, and of course, all the different racial and national identities that overlap that. They give us, and other people who consider themselves people of color, they give us that opportunity. They train people that work in white-led newsrooms, the big newsrooms such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, and other major daily newspapers, as well as magazines, digital outlets. And then they train people like me who want to start new digital outlets and need support. And it's why this is also why I also put my name, not just as a planner, but as a media person, to the recent statement of Black planners you may have seen circulating. You can click on the link in this part. If you scroll down, you'll know where I'm at in the written part of this video. It was on the Black and Urban blog and some other places. You've seen it. It's the square, kind of pastel-y square. Those organizations at the bottom, we're all not just planners, but we're media outlets. And I personally do more media than planning at this point. And when I do planning projects, I'm on the public engagement side. Not that I don't like drawing maps, but the public engagement, reaching out to the community, communicating with the community, doing public relations and communicating with the existing media is so vital. And we are, if you're curious about, okay, well, who are the Black equivalents of Planet is in Next City Streets vlog? That's us. We're underfunded. We're overworked. We're doing this on the side. We're doing this. Many of the folks on that sheet are licensed planners, are working on being licensed, which is a process in itself. And they're still writing these blogs. And the pandemic has helped with a little bit of extra time, but as we all know, this COVID pandemic has brought all kinds of other things to the forefront. And yes, many of those publications, Planet is in, Bloomberg City Lab, Next City, all of them have started to include Black leadership. They have Black board members and heads and columnists and major donors, but that's not ownership. That's not full creative and editorial control. That is key in this moment. If we're going to talk about Black liberation and Black power and Black Lives Matter, we need to talk about who owns our media outlets and who controls our story. Now, I will say this, if you've seen my byline in a publication of any kind or read expert commentary from me, I can tell you right now that I've probably only been paid for a quarter of that. Now, I've submitted some things that are going to happen, you're going to see, and there's payment involved. But then there's some other things that I just talked about and talked to people that I was supposed to talk to, and unfortunately, I missed the deadline. I do get honoraria or payment, like a small payment for my speeches. I don't speak for free as much as I used to, and 95% of my speeches are for pay. But there's been so many others in the early days that were not. And yes, that matters because our words, well, I wrote this part and further down, I'll get into that, but I've watched so many media, urbanist media, non-urbanist media outlets sprout up, expand, and grow over these 10 years. And you know that there's a couple of media projects in particular that you all know about me being part of that weren't necessarily under my banner. I can tell you that I have very little creative control, and I was not paid for those media platforms. No shade. We've had this conversation privately, and I'll say this publicly. For those of you who are asking about that show coming back, it is not coming back unless we come together. Maybe at this moment, it's time to come together and have that conversation. But I only control things that come underneath the Black Urbanist, Kristen Jeffers Media, or Chris pattern. That's what I control. And that's why I was so excited and have been excited, especially with the dearth of queer-led media outlets, no matter what race or nationality, but just period. I wanted to uplift my partner, Lesa's vision in her recent podcast, and just the podcast in general we've been working on since we've been in quarantine, to bring the design world and everyone else in the LGBTQIA plus world together. Specifically other Black, masculine presenting lesbian queer women, or masculine presenting lesbian queer women together to have this conversation. Looking forward to continuing to curate conversations with other gender nonconforming, trans, and other cis-presenting queer folks like myself, because that's, once again, another intersection we don't hear from enough. We don't hear from it enough in the regular media. We don't have as many outlets. Our outlets have fluctuated over the years. As much as we depend on the Black press, or revere the Black press, and we revere queer press and queer media, we are not capitalized nowhere near enough. And when you niche down in areas like design, think about that. Like I said a little bit in the last monthly email message I sent, the recent spate of media attention on Black designers and planners and urbanists and community activists and anybody kind of tied in this greater design world. It's been great. I'm excited. I'm happy to see so many people having this conversation. I'm happy that the tide has turned. It's not as hard to have these conversations, that if I tweet something or somebody else tweets something, that we're getting listened to. But what happens when the cameras, their pens, their clicks, their typing goes away, specifically the ones that are white led and more geared towards profit margins and supporting real estate developers and all these people that don't necessarily want to hear that their tenants are being evicted or that there's no transit, like the inconvenient truths that we all know about as Black people and queer people and poor people in our design and built environment. What's going to happen? What's going to happen after some of these publications think that one story or the one takeover, the guest editing, all that was enough? What's going to happen if you can't, what happens if you can't be on these social media platforms 24/7, pumping up your community, pumping up yourself, your cause, your work? And another thing I do want to go into before I end this video is the word urbanist itself. And I do realize that there is inequity in it, but I want to talk about this from a words media perspective here. I know many of us have been wrestling with this word urbanist this summer. Shout out to Dr. Dez's An Urbanist Assembly, much needed. You need to unpack. It is time to unpack it. Just like I said in Streets blog earlier this summer, it's time to unpack it. Same with the person who was in, I don't think it was Play Philly directly, but in that NPR collective, and I've linked to both of those things in the written version of these remarks. And note that I do know I'm going to put this actually on my YouTube so you can get the full transcript of me talking these words, because it's a slightly different presentation than what I wrote on paper. I know many of us have been wrestling with this urbanist word, but I've honestly been worried about something different than the design elitism for years. I've been worried more so that in a world where it's okay to call Black music, Black culture, and even Black neighborhoods that aren't even nowhere near being dense, urban. Not that there's anything bad about calling it urban, but calling it urban as a euphemism, calling it urban as a way of, because you can't fathom saying the word Black or even African American. I've worried about that for a long time, and I've worried about somebody grabbing a hold to the words Black urbanist that wasn't me or someone like me that wanted to protect and put forth a radical, real, honest spirit behind it. I've worried that they were run roughshod and shut down Black voices and create further misinformation. And I've seen the media do it so much, and I've already mentioned media issues before. I've thought about, okay, well, I won't use Black urbanist as much, or I'll put it somewhere else. But if somebody else gets a hold to those hashtags and those handles and even the trademark, and right now, as it stands right now, somebody could still trademark it and I still lose track of it, but I do, and I'm hoping that as I continue to raise money and continue to build my courses, that I'll be able to give money to that. But I'll talk about the opportunity to give money to that cause of being able to help me continue to be a steward over the words, the Black urbanist, and that platform, the Black urbanist, in just a moment. But another thing I noticed was when you Google the word urbanist, it's full of white males. You have to go several pages to even get to my site. You have to go several pages to get something that mentions queer life, and then you have to go several pages to even get to something that says feminism. And that's not, I don't even know if that's inclusive feminism or it's just white feminism. It is a very white, a very male, a very cis, a very privileged space that the word urbanist sits in. And that's just on Google. And you can understand why we would need to have an Urbanist Assembly to unpack this word that seems to only be levied by white, male, cis, wealthy, developer type people. And so I also want to address that, I haven't always gotten it perfect. I've been complicit of held isms, attitudes, performed actions that I'm not proud of, and that haven't been helpful to the cause of queer liberation, trans liberation, and access across economic classes. I'm doing my best to make sure that this is available, but I don't know ASL. There's certain things that are going to be missing in the disability community, and that absolutely has to change. And I also want to make it clear that I'm in solidarity. There's no rivalry, there's no active beef with any of the other movements, the adjacent movements, the Zionist protests, Black Space, the full movement of movement for Black Lives. As much as I can, I support any and all grassroots and mutual aid efforts. I believe that we should be out on the streets because we haven't been heard, we haven't been listened to, and there's been so many people that have not. You can go in some neighborhoods and go into some schools, and we're seeing that with this COVID pandemic, and even beforehand, I've seen it anyway. Time hasn't necessarily changed. There's still people that don't have access to the full internet. They're not keeping up. They're not able to keep up with the discourse online. They're barely trying to get shifts at the grocery stores, even now with the grocery store being essential. That's just one example of how information is not getting out there. We all know about the misinformation campaigns that the social sites are doing. We all have seen ourselves throttled. We've all seen the algorithm. And so that's part of why, because social media is just so wild, like kind of been a wild west, I'm still there, but I'm not there as much. And that's why I'm creating and teaching this curriculum that's centering these stories and scholarship of Black, queer, feminist, urbanist, women, and non-binary people. I want to also kind of note, I'm doing 2 sections of it because there's something called an equity caucus. It's kind of like an affinity group. Basically, it allows for people, the purpose is not to separate each other, but when it comes to processing information, we do have biases. And sometimes we do have reactions, and sometimes those reactions can be a distraction, because for a lot of folks, just like for me, I have to admit that seeing certain people decide to finally get on board with equity and justice and liberation this summer, it's definitely had me feeling away. But you all coming into learning this, you do need to learn. We need to learn. We need to be part of this, and we need to be doing the right thing. And we need to atone for what we've done wrong. And so having separate spaces to learn information and process information and be a support group is, in a way, I've just created 2 separate support groups. I got a support group for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And actually, we're going to probably be breaking those down some more as well, because we're not a monolith by any means, but for now. And I go into this in more detail. I'm actually, I was kind of reading some of the paragraphs of the written part, but I will just go ahead and summarize this in the video for you. So that's why there's a mighty network, and I don't want anybody who's marginalized and can't afford to pay to not be able to get this information. So that's why there's an invite-only space. I also wanted to be a brave space, and Mighty Networks has worked for me so far, but I'm not welded to Mighty Networks. I just want to have that space. I want those lessons out there. I want people to be able to learn. And specifically with a lot of people doing distance learning, I want your children to have that space. And I want them to have a space with something that is geared and considers the fact that Black people and other people of color are approaching life in neighborhoods and design and planning in different ways. Many of us have a story like me, and some of our stories are even more tragic, of people who've died violently, people have been sick, some of us have lived in very rough situations. Some of us have been fired or underpaid or had to quit their jobs because of just nonsense on a job. So those things, I want to make sure that people know and have the space to process. And so that's what the Mighty Network is for. Now, the patron for now at the $40 level is for any white allies and accomplices, people who you may think you're an ally. And of course, I'm very much a part of the folks who say you don't just give ally out to anybody, you don't just invite anybody to the cookout. But if you want to come, if you want to learn, if you want to soak in and join several other people who've already done that over the past couple of months, pledge at the $40 level, and that is there for you. There are links to that in the words below. I'm including my original thoughts here, and depending on what platform you're reading this on, you'll have links to those areas, or patreon.com/Kristen E. Jeffers. Or you can, and then if people want to just do one-time donations, I've got my Cash App and Venmo linked and set up. You can do that there. And one other thing that I'm really excited about for next month is that I've really leaned into the fact that I'm educating and that I'm called to do that. I love designing. And yes, not everybody is supposed to be out here designing. That's not everybody's ministry or place. So please don't expect everybody to design for you, and don't expect everybody to educate. Find the people like us who've said, hello, I'm a person that is training themselves, been trained, gifted, given this from the spirit and ancestors to deliver this information. And so I realized the way I've got the Patreon set up right now is that for my time and labor, that $40 rate is really for an individual. And it only covers certain books. But what's going to happen in Teachable starting next month, and all my folks who are already registered, if you pledge tonight, you'll be able to get first dibs on this when this launches. It'll be probably towards the end of next month. I'm going to give myself the room because I'm still trying to write my book, and I'll probably give an update on when the book's coming, if it's going to come in October. I did want it to be out there for the 10th anniversary, but I am busy. A lot of all this stuff's going on. I'm still feeling the somatics and the weight of seeing the violence and feeling everything. So I'm taking my time. I am doing that resting that I told everybody to do in the email earlier this summer. So I'm doing these things at the time and the pace that I need to feel good about myself and to be in a good space. So the Teachable School is going to come out, and the Teachable School is going to be even more expanded than what we've been doing on Patreon. People, it's been hitting heavy. We've been reading Chocolate Cities. I've been breaking down each chapter. It's been lectures. It's been kind of like this. You've been hanging out with me for about an hour or so each time. But what this Teachable is going to do, I'm going to be adding in other, like I promised, with this being not just a book club, but an idea salon, it's going to be a school. And it's going to not only center and talk about and provide primary sources of Black women and non-binary people, specifically queer and feminist Black not women and non-binary people. But I'm also going to be reading and criticizing several other key texts of urbanism and planning and development. There will be videos and little reviews on that. I won't be spending as much time. I won't be going in depth chapter by chapter on, say, like The Death and the Life or Rise of the Creative Class, but I will be reviewing those, and there will be some of the essays that pop up every once in a while. I'm going to be archiving and putting inside the Teachable, and then doing videos like this around the Teachable. Another reason I haven't been able to do as many videos, and those of you who are in the course will know, I truly need an equipment upgrade. I'm hanging on thin ice right now. I've got my Zoom hooked up. We just did a camera upgrade, but I'm just literally just knocking on my nightstand here that this computer does not go kaplooey before I'm able to get these things done. So any of your support on Patreon, Cash App, Venmo, and you can reach out to me, that's going to help that. And then Teachable is going to be set up so your school, your university can get a site license. Your company can get a site license, and that can help sustain this kind of education because we need it. As you can see, tragedies are still happening. Climate change is still happening. We need to redo the police thing. We really don't. We need to help rebuild these systems, because I want to make it clear that Black lives matter, and they matter across the board, and all Black lives matter. It's not just Black Lives Matter as long as you don't ask for equal power of pay. It's not Black Lives Matter as long as buildings aren't destroyed, even though many of these buildings and monuments represent slavery, segregation, and existing classism and other discriminatory issues. It's not Black Lives Matter until it's time to think about abolishing police systems and other harmful, charitable, nonprofit, or governmental systems that hurt and harm people, instead of building up grassroots action, mutual aid, worker co-ops, and other people-centered activities that are inclusive of all genders, sexualities, economic classes, abilities, and racial and ethnic backgrounds and nationalities. I'm still here making this platform under the Black Urbanist, Kristen Jeffers Media, Chris Pattern, all the different things I write and do and create under 100% to be synonymous with Black queer feminist liberation. And I'm not here to be intentionally ableist classes or anything other marginalization. Once again, I said before, I'm not perfect. I'm working on myself, but I want to hold on to the Black urbanist words. I want to hold it tight. I want to, like a little baby. I don't want heteropatriarchal, capitalistic, imperialistic thought being associated with the words Black urbanism. Now, I know I can't control all of that, but anything I create under that banner, and I want to continue to flood it with the word, and I want this to be around the ideas of family and positive family, positive village creation, pods, something that's those of you who are familiar with transformative justice, which is something that people are really working on to replace the need to have police involved in domestic and intimate partner and other interpersonal situations. And so one last thing with this video, and of course you can read a version of these remarks below or above, depending on what platform you're reading or seeing this on, or you could just listen here. I want I want us to keep this in mind. I appreciate some apologies here, it's getting a little dark here here on the East Coast recording this video, but I want to thank you all for all the years and the support. You can @ me at Black Urbanist. If you know how to contact me in other ways, you can do the same thing. And I just would love to continue to have your help to do this work. I'm actually, if anybody who wants to volunteer to be social media ambassadors, curriculum facilitators, fundraisers, I'm absolutely here for you, and I would love to do that. And now I hope that you understand specifically what I'm working on, which is increasing our media outlets and increasing our representation in media, and enhancing the educational field, because having these kinds of educational opportunities is not necessarily guaranteed in the world of distance learning, and even in a regular day. These educational opportunities will be very helpful for our youth. So reach out to me, share this email, blog post, Twitter post, YouTube video, wherever you're seeing this content, please feel free to share it. And then those of you who feel free to join me in the online circles. If you missed my commentary, if you like what you heard tonight, you want to be part of this vision going forward, please support Black Space, Movement for Black Lives, Designers Protest. Please support those actions and direct people to those as needed. Support the collective of media and planning platforms. If you are part of the major professional organizations, please continue to push them to be more equitable, both racially and financially. That's necessary too. And if you are working in-house at firms, please keep pushing them. And if you are in control, especially if you are a white person or a person of power in some of our legacy design firms, in government positions, please examine yourself and realize ways that you can continue to help us and help this cause. Please do not continue to put the burden on us to tell the story. Now, some of us, that's what we do, but that's not everybody's job. It's not everybody's place. Please take that burden off of us. And so I will see you on the inside of my courses. I'll see you occasionally on social media. And I thank you all for listening. Once again, I'm Kristen Jeffers. This is me sharing my thoughts here at the end of August, going into September as we go into another month of 2020. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. We're still not out of COVID. And those of you who want to reach out to me, please do so. Look forward to hearing from you. So take care.